we've obviously been spoilt tonight, but we will go on to our second talk of tonight with Debbie.
So you should see a giant slide that says improving agility. Does everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, giant slide. Okay, super. While I introduce myself, I've got a couple of polls for you to answer. I hope people will give it a try. Go to menti.com, MENTI, and enter the code 55481010. It's the little cloud on my screen here. If you didn't hear me say that, just take a look there. There's just two polls there. Just answer them. The answers will pop up later in my slides. So just, answer the two questions while I introduce myself. So hi, I'm Debbie Levitt. I've been a strategist and CX and UX designer, researcher, trainer, change agent, architect since the mid-90s. Delta CX is my full-service consultancy. If there's anything I can do for anybody, we do help people with their CX and UX projects, and we also do helping them improving their UX teams, practices, relationships with Agile and engineering and everybody. And I've been focusing a lot on helping people shift towards customer centricity. Clients call me Mary Poppins because I fly in, fix everything I can, sing a few songs, and fly away to where I'm needed next. So also, if you have any questions for me that aren't answered today, my email is on every slide. Feel free to send me a note. And also, please excuse me, I've been a little bit sick lately, so I might drink water a lot during the presentation. I'm mostly fine, but I'm a little bit not fine. So there you go. Also, you are absolutely welcome to connect with me online. Find me on LinkedIn as Debbie Levitt. You can also find me on YouTube as Delta CX. I'm usually live 4 times a week, and I'm happy to take your questions. You don't have to be from the UX world. I'm usually live at about 5:30 p.m. UK time, so come check it out. You'll also see that a little camera icon is going to pop up on the bottom of the slide, and that just means the slide is done animating. So if people like to take screenshots or whatever, that's a good time. If you haven't muted your microphone, please do go ahead and do that now so that we're not hearing any background noise or people's adventures or someone going to the loo or, the things that happen during these things. So please do check now if you are muted. And also please note that I'm saying CX in some places where you might expect to hear UX. I treat these two interchangeably. CX is rising up more and more as I think, a broader and more appropriate term for what we do, but you might hear me say CX or UX, and really I'm just talking about the same thing. So when we are disconnected from how our users and customers define quality and done, we are going down the wrong path. Agile has definitions of quality and done that are supposed to be about making sure the product is done right and is high quality. In our Agile world, how do we define quality? Velocity, productivity, and efficiency? Improved software performance? Fewer no bugs? Meet stakeholder requirements? What about our definition of done? We did what we planned? It fit business objectives? It's coded, documented, tested, and deployable? There's something huge missing here. Does our product match our users' definitions of quality and done? Does it fit their tasks and needs? Did the system optimize or complicate a workflow? If engineering's code is high quality and it feels done, but the concept doesn't match what users need, is it still quality? Is it still done? Or was all of that time spent engineering the wrong so-called solution a waste of time and budget? Quality and done are often self-reflective for engineers and don't often take the user experience into account. Even the definition of ready rarely considers if we built the right execution of the right idea for our users. A product owner shared this last year on LinkedIn. The point of the diagram is to say that product managers exist in an overlap between product and users, where UX and tech and business overlap in a mini Venn diagram. It looks like we have a lot of product and features that don't serve users or meet their needs, and a lot of users whose needs aren't addressed by our product. The product and features that don't match our users are risk we need to mitigate or waste we should cut. The needs that users have that we're not aware of or aren't addressing are missed opportunities and could create risk. They're money we're leaving on the table. Why isn't the Venn diagram of product and users completely overlapping circles like this? All product was built for customer needs. Some customer needs have not yet been identified or addressed. That's our future product. We claim that we're focused on customer satisfaction, supporting and empowering our teammates, allowing time in our process for good or great design, and being lean by cutting waste and reducing work we shouldn't do. But I've pretty much never seen these happening anywhere I've worked or my friends have worked. Are these really happening on your team? Are we using retros to identify problems and waste and then truly fixing those problems and cutting that waste? What about principle 2? We welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Can you imagine if we stopped the project when we realized it was garbage or not quite right for the customer? Now that would be agile. We fill our world with catchy sayings we use as excuses when we're not agile, lean, or building products that our customers would give 5 stars out of 5, like just ship it, often without knowing if it's the right solution for our customers. We'll fix it later. How often do we really fix it later? When is later? What will we have to delay and what will that cost? Users will have to figure it out, or they will flood you with support tickets, or cancel, or give up. Fail fast. There is nothing cool about failing fast or slowly when real paying or trial customers have to suffer with your failure. If you're not embarrassed, you shipped too late. Does this mean that our goal is to be embarrassed by our product? Most of us would prefer to feel proud that our product is a great match to customers' needs and tasks. Lean is the least we can do to get to the next step. Lean disagrees. This is a bastardization of Lean that seemed to come from the Lean Startup book. Anybody who has studied Toyota's original approach to Lean or Lean Six Sigma knows that Lean is about identifying and cutting waste. Fake Lean is wasteful, and that takes us down wrong paths, which means let's cut fake Lean for not being lean. Move fast and break things. Sure, only if you fix those things before the public struggles with them. It's good enough for the engineering team, for stakeholders, or for our paying or trial customers. We've been experimenting with speed over quality methods for years now, and it should be pretty obvious from our project costs, ROI, customer support, tickets, tweets about us, our stock price, and other hints that it doesn't always work. We must stop praying to the false gods of speed and give your customers broken things. We must stop using any of these as excuses for low effort or failures. When I speak at engineering, agile, and lean conferences, I ask the audience to raise their hands if they've ever known while building something that something wasn't right for target users. And here's how you answered that question. Some of you are dealing with it constantly, and some of you mostly sometimes and some rarely, but you've all experienced it. And every hand goes up when I ask people about this. They know they're building something of poor quality that might have to be fixed or undone later, but nobody feels empowered to say anything. Like assembly line robots, they're being judged by how much they get done. And creating a higher quality product means spending more time and money up front. Instead, somebody says, we'll fix it later. We hide the later fix in another budget, but call the original project that caused all the problems a success. And isn't it amazing that we never have time to create a better product now, but we'll have time later to stop a future project to fix this old one? If our systems aren't right for every user interacting with them, can we still congratulate ourselves for having an efficient engineering process? If Agile is supposed to be about welcoming change even late in a process, why do we reward silence and avoid holding people accountable for disaster projects? Workers and teams who are afraid to speak up or stop a project that's likely to fail signify a culture problem that's going to need improvement. All the customer knows is the customer experience. That's it. They don't see 1,000 developers. They don't know if you had an agile mindset, a product mindset, a project mindset, or any other mindset or religion. What's the last website, app, or system you used that you really loved? It solved your problems. It helped you get your tasks done efficiently. It's hard to think of one, isn't it? Would your users put your products and services on the list of what they really love? When you use a system that frustrates you, you're probably not thinking, I wonder how many sprints they spent on that. When things don't work the way you expected to, you're probably thinking, who built this junk? And that's a good question. Who researched with people like you to learn your habits, motivations, needs, tasks, and then architect and design for those? Was this tested on people like you before it was unleashed on the public? Functioning software is a bit of a low standard, and it's not how customers measure us. How can we make sure we are correctly understanding what customers need, delivering that, and avoiding the risk and cost of mistakes? The main process most UX practitioners use is called UCD, User-Centered Design. You'll sometimes see this as HCD, Human-Centered Design. It's got multiple phases, including research, interaction design, content strategy, sorry, I said that out of order, information architecture, testing, and visual design. Each phase has multiple tasks that can be done. And UX professionals must approach this strategically, deciding which tasks are needed, how long those will take, in what order we'll do them, and what resources are required. Order does matter here because each phase is informed by the phases that came before it. Research informs everything. Information architecture informs interaction design. I've made it look linear, but in fact, it can be fluid and it's sometimes cyclical. For example, testing interaction design concepts often leads to iteration. This means another round of information architecture and interaction design. We should then build and test that round before we can call it completed. In this case, our work spirals its way down to the best solution. Each iteration gets the designer closer to properly clarifying root causes and coming to the correct design solution. You'll also hear a lot about models that say, learn, build, and test. That's an oversimplification considering all of the steps any of us take to learn, build, or test. But learning, building, testing, and iterating and improving are baked into our process. You might also hear discover, define, design, validate, and iterate. All of these models or processes can be superimposed onto the phases and tasks of user-centered design. And you're probably already familiar with what we call interaction design. This is our wireframes, prototypes, and other blueprints of how this lays out, how it works, and how people interact with it. But you might not have known about all of the other phases of our process that make our interaction design work good. If we care about quality, then we care about the quality of the process and the outcomes it can create. It's also why when UX professionals are asked to just guess at the build phase and make some quick wireframes, often without researching or testing, it's another high-risk guessing adventure that could lead our project or company down the wrong path. It's the lean sin of underutilized talent when we only budget enough time for UX to guess at screens when there is so much risk mitigating science and technique in our process. Before we can add UX elements and the customer's definitions of quality to our definition of done, we need to understand their tasks, unmet needs, and perspectives. Research is the most important UX phase. It's not user-centered without users. We primarily want to observe them, since you can learn a lot more about who people are and their tasks, needs, and goals by watching them. Interviews are excellent when we ask the right questions the right ways, but since what people say and what people do aren't always the same, observational studies are best. Statistics and quantitative data are nice, but there's no substitute for observing and interviewing users, deeply understanding them, and getting qualitative data. UX wants to know the what, why, and how, and not just how many. Every step of research is important. Planning, writing interview and task guides, recruiting participants, executing on the research, interpreting it, evaluating what we found, and arriving on actionable insights. You can see how that's different than, we asked a few users what they want and we're building what they said. And testing is the QA of UX. We don't skimp on or exclude QA testing for our code, so why would we rush out untested product concepts? Usability testing helps us validate, invalidate, and improve concepts. Research and testing help us know what is quality and valuable to users. This is a repeat slide. I'm sorry. I should have taken this one out. You just heard it. Excuse me. Note to self, slide 13. So our coworkers, managers, leaders, and executives very rarely see the science and technique or the strategy that go into our work. They don't know the core of UX work is cognitive psychology and studies of human behavior. People see wireframes, pretty screens, sketches, whiteboards, and walls of sticky notes, so they think UX makes screens. Anybody can make wireframes and decide how the product looks and works. But my phases of proficiency model is really an iceberg where people are used to seeing just the tip of the iceberg without understanding what's going on below the surface. The iceberg model explains why Agile and Scrum people keep telling me UX has easy work anybody can do, like paper prototypes. This is so easy anybody can do it means we're in building blocks land, ignoring the quality of the work being done and ignoring the body of the iceberg, the cognitive psychology, interaction design, information architecture, accessibility, best practices, and skills that we need to create excellent interaction designs. Hey, I learned some basic programming in 1979. I taught myself HTML in 1995. I'm passionate about engineering, so I can code to production, right? Or am I just at the building blocks phase of proficiency? If you are squirming in your seat at the idea of having to deal with my code when I have a degree in music, then you know what CX and UX people are thinking every time we hear that anybody can do our work or engineers and product managers making some wireframes will be good enough for customers. We like to tell UX they're slowing things down, or we ask how fast can they get those screens done. These are great questions when our organization believes in speed over quality. But as we shift towards customers' definitions of quality, do we want high quality from UX? Do we want their best work, world-class work, their worst work, something in between? And why? Let's make sure the risk register shows that UX was asked to do not their best work, or they were not given enough time to do their best work. I'm all for holding people accountable, but if there's a UX problem and we didn't give those people enough time to do their best work, I'd rather hold accountable the person who decided how much time UX gets. So how do we bring customer centricity into Agile and improve our agility? Here's a graphic from U.S. Department of Defense document from October 2018 on how to detect BS in Agile, since it's become such a buzzword and not every contractor or team promising it is delivering it. The document offers questions that help determine when a project isn't really Agile and what answers to listen for. The graphic's a little hard to read, but here are some of my favorite flowchart diamonds. Are teams delivering working software to at least some subset of real users every iteration, including the first, and gathering feedback? Note that for many teams, customer feedback means waiting for customer support to tell you people are having trouble, or waiting months for marketing to run a survey. The survey won't tell us what's going wrong, why, and how. Good qualitative CX and UX research is the key to getting the most meaningful and actionable customer feedback. Is feedback from users turned into concrete work items for sprint teams on timelines shorter than 1 month? That means when we get feedback, we don't sit on things forever in the backlog or icebox. We're supposed to work on them within a month. My favorite. Are teams empowered to change the requirements based on user feedback? We've got to change the requirements even if that means evolving or scrapping features or entire products based on the feedback of real users. And if any of the answers to these is no, you're getting Agile BS. So says the American Department of Defense. Look for Agile BS on your teams. It's also reflected in sprint goals. This common template for Agile sprint goals says, our focus is on achievement or outcome. We believe it delivers benefit or impact to user. This will be confirmed when event happens. Supposedly, this helps teams focus on users and customers and their outcomes. But that's not a guarantee, mostly because of one risky word here. Did you see it? Believe. Imagine work goals being based on something someone believes, a guess or assumption. Shouldn't we know it delivers certain benefits because the concept has been validated and vetted before we're planning engineering sprints around it? Every time we notice we are guessing, assuming, hypothesizing, which I like to say is Greek for guessing, making things up, or working based on what someone believes. Our UX researchers should study whatever it is so we can know. Step in when you hear people wanting to work from guesses. I've rewritten sprint goals to be more user-centric. Our focus is on user outcome. UX has confirmed it delivers benefit to user type or persona. This benefit will be measured by KPI, OKR, or metric. In the old version, we're hoping to later confirm there was some sort of benefit for the user. There might have been zero benefits, and you will find that out really late after a lot of expensive engineering time. That's not agile or lean. UX can confirm the benefits and value earlier through user-centered design. I'll take questions at the end. Now we're not hoping to find out later if something delivered benefits to users. Now we're just going to measure how much success or failure we had. Hopefully success. The main element that creates success for UX and Agile that I found is planning and estimation. If you didn't really know about the user-centered design process, its phases and tasks, then there's a 100% chance that you will incorrectly estimate the time I need to do my work. Yet, everywhere I've worked, other people guess at the time I need and surprise me at the kickoff meeting. These incorrect estimations lead to interpersonal conflicts, projects appearing to be derailed or stalled by UX, and rushing to push out a design that might still be quite flawed, having not received enough iterations or testing. Product, project, portfolio, and program managers should bring UX into earliest discussions, so projects have the right budgets and timelines from the start. Agile teams should include their UX teammate in planning and estimations. Estimating our time is part of our strategic approach to a project, so please make sure you're working with your UX buddies on estimating their time and resources. So here was the poll that you took earlier. When would you like to learn the product is going in the wrong direction? And traditional flavors of Agile are correct in saying that we've got to collect feedback from customers to know if our product has value and is considered high quality by users, and of course going in the right direction. But Agile and the MVP and one of you imagine that we've got to collect that feedback after releasing our product when our risks and costs are highest. Since Agile doesn't always think about CX or UX processes and professionals, Agile doesn't realize that we can get that feedback through early concept testing of prototypes. Teams claiming to be Agile burn time and money to learn very late in the game. We've gone in the wrong direction. Learning this late that we need to fix or rework our product, I'm going to say it's waterfall in disguise. Agile can pride itself on doing smaller batches of work and releasing products more frequently. But if you're continuously releasing garbage and not finding flaws until weeks or months later, I think you've just gone over the waterfall. The very earliest moments of project planning must already be focused on customers' needs. CX teammates should be part of that project planning. I can't say that enough. And I'm just amazed time after time at companies that say, well, we'll release it now and we'll just fix it later. I'm just always amazed by that. We know we're releasing something bad. Well, when someone mentions the MVP, this cartoon is usually brought out. It shows you wouldn't build a car by starting with one wheel, then two wheels, then a car's body, and finally a full car. The cartoon shows that an MVP would be more like building a skateboard first, then a kick scooter, then a bicycle, then a motorcycle, and finally the full car you wanted to build in the first place. In reality, neither of these are the MVP. If we're starting with sad faces, we're getting this wrong. In both examples, the early products you are releasing to users aren't close to what you're trying to build. If users need a car, neither a single wheel nor a skateboard will be a match to their needs. Users don't want minimally viable anything, so make sure customers would give every release 5 stars out of 5. Reframe the MVP. If you want to release a slice of something first, make sure that it delivers maximum user value. Perhaps instead of a skateboard, it's a small car. And remember to utilize UX as your business intelligence and risk mitigation team. We can know before we write code if this is the right execution of the right idea. I can show you this graphic on how CX and UX have to be 2 or more sprints ahead of engineering. I can tell you that we need to start before engineering because if we're populating the backlog with finalized designs, we have to start ahead of you. And I wrote a book on this and it already needs to be rewritten. I can show you a variety of models that tell you how CX or UX work with Agile, but I can make this really easy because all 7 models on the screen say the same thing. CX and UX are on their own track. They're their own stream of work. They're not working on the same stories engineering is working on in the same sprint. We are at least 2 sprints ahead, preferably 4 or more. Agile is just kind of a predictable and reliable assembly line. So let's all exhale, get UX onto its own track, cut the conflict and control, and get to work. Google Try-Track Agile for more information. And in reality, no domain is on engineering's track other than engineering. Product made a big prioritized roadmap well before Sprint 0 or 1, and nobody called it big product up front. Hey, is Debbie really recommending big design up front? I thought we were supposed to stay away from that. If you've heard big design up front, I bet it wasn't said by a UX professional. We have no reason to use negative framing around our own work. Negative framing is when people make decisions or decide risk based on whether something is framed positively or negatively. This leads great after Nick's talk about how we persuade people. It's why we're told the positive frame that 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this product versus being told the negative frame that 20% of dentists recommend against this product. Big design upfront is a term someone made up to make the UX process sound like something we don't want, to make it sound large, lengthy, risky, and something we should avoid. Without critical thinking, we could agree, but then we would also have to agree that putting 6 to 10 engineers on a project for weeks or months is also large, lengthy, and risky. Giving each other's work negative names isn't good for process, culture, collaboration, or outcomes. Let's also please not call UX waterfall. If 8 engineers wanting 8 weeks to do something isn't waterfall, then UX wanting 1 to 8 weeks to do something isn't waterfall. And second, design has always come first, since the dawn of time. So it should be upfront. When else would you do the design? Build, release, then design it doesn't sound right. So what's the smallest of work UX can pass to engineering? There was a viral video a few years ago where an automatic soap dispenser had been installed above a power outlet. Your hand and possibly your power plug will be covered in wet soap just as you're connecting to live electricity. The caption I saw was, "This is the reason we do integration testing as well as unit testing." That is a good engineering joke. But this is why CX architects and tests complete workflows rather than separate pieces in isolation. Imagine if someone had tested a prototype of a soap dispenser over a power outlet. The problem would have been noticed before anything got installed. Lots of human pain saved. CX needs the big picture of the full user experience for whatever task users are trying to achieve. We can't just design small pieces separately and never test them together. We think in terms of the user's task, process, or workflow, and we must build for the full arc of that task and test it and improve it before we send it to engineering to be built. It's our version of acceptance testing. If the project is something smaller than a complete workflow, then of course we can be nimble and need less time. Not everything CX does requires a giant runway, but product, project, and engineering must be prepared for when a feature calls for that. We often hear that UX isn't agile, but it's easily explained. Let's imagine a team of 4 developers and 2 QA professionals. They want 4 sprints of work. which is normal. At most companies where I've worked, my time was split between 3 projects. So not only do you expect something in days or a single sprint, but you expect it from 1/3 of a person. And at many companies I've worked at, there are only a few researchers supporting every project the entire department is doing. That's a bottleneck. This staffing imbalance is completely inefficient and will never be agile. But instead of fixing this, people seem to just enjoy telling UX that they're not agile, they're not lean, and they're waterfall. And this is why our customers can't have nice things. So we should pursue a better way to work together and enhance agility. My Delta CX model suggests that CX architects work in pairs. Even one person 100% dedicated would be an upgrade from the 1/3 of a person you probably get now. This is the person handling information architecture, interaction design, and prototyping. Think of this as adding one person to the team. If you have the pair, they'll share one seat on the team, but you can get twice the work out of them, which could mean twice the speed. Now you have that UX skill on the team, as nearly every flavor of Agile suggests, except you have someone actually competent and efficient at it. The CX architect pair would have their own research team. Again, this is my future dream, but just stick with me. Hire someone with 5 or more years of specialized research experience and team them up with 2 junior researchers. Since these are specialist jobs, we can't just ask a business analyst to do some research. You can't hire research newbies alone without a very experienced person to lead and support them. Now you have a ratio of 5 CX architects and researchers to a product or project team. Putting a larger and more qualified CX team on projects would allow them to be more efficient. If UX is a bottleneck, hire more specialists. That's the too long didn't read. Don't try to guess at their work because it looks easy to you. We make it look easy, but it's not. Add UX pros until there is no bottleneck. Staffing up with highly qualified UX specialists has to be better than inefficient and wasteful guesses, hypotheses, hopes, dreams, beliefs, and a lot of fear that you might be feeling sometimes and that customers might feel. It's also better than making up negative names for the work I need to do, or putting us in a silo, or saying I'm in an ivory tower, or some of the other strange things I've seen when engineering and UX collide. So where do companies get the budget for all of these new well-qualified practitioners? Well, it's really the answer to where is the ROI? And a lot of that is in saving engineering rework, customer support not having to help people so much. If we have a more desirable product, maybe marketing doesn't have to try so hard to market it and sales can attract and retain more customers. There's so many ways that we can show this ROI through the larger arc of that software life cycle. So it's just one of many places. If you're not sure where else, Google cost of poor quality, which is one of my favorite things from Lean Six Sigma. Those are all costs that you should be able to save, and we can build that back into a budget to hire some UX peeps. So what now? So here's a few quick pointers or not so quick pointers I have on making Agile more customer-centric. First of all, you're going to need a world-class UX team of well-qualified practitioners, and it's harder than it sounds because a lot of companies don't really understand what UX does, and so they don't tend to hire the right people. They look for the prettiest portfolio or the most colorful portfolio. They don't really understand what skills or abilities they need to deeply assess during that interview process. So I just want to mention quickly, I've got completely free training at deltacx.academy on how to hire UX peeps. Number 2, keep adding qualified UX practitioners to a project until they're not a bottleneck. Make sure that there are project and team charters so everybody knows what everyone's responsible for and where each role's boundaries are. Start with research. Don't start with building or experimenting until we know this has user value. Remember, it's learn, build, test. If you're doing build, test, learn, you missed that early learning. So remember, learn first and keep learning. Understand that UX's main role is customer research, advocacy, and shepherding customer value. UX cares about the business, but we often feel like we're the only people really caring about customers. But when all of us can be customer-centric, we won't look like lone weirdos who everyone says isn't speaking the business's language. We need more people to speak the customer's language. UX is part of our strategic approach to product. We start with research and solid knowledge on all of the people who will use this or interact with it. Then UX, product, and engineering are that wonderful three voices model to then prioritize the pain points and unmet needs that we found. Of course, we get to estimate our own time so that nobody is surprised by when UX work is going to get done and how long it's going to take. And we get that time because people who care about agile and customer satisfaction recognize that getting the product right the first time more often pays off in time, money, morale, and more. Shift away from any broken models or processes. I think the MVP is really broken. Scrum.org says it could be improved if we called it minimum inspectable increment. That's not customer-centric. It shows that old ways need complete reinvention, not slight renaming. It doesn't ship if our target customers wouldn't see it as 5-star quality. Cut lean waste early. Scrap bad concepts before they're built. Product doesn't ship if it's not completely intuitive and usable by all customers. It doesn't ship if people with visual, mobility, hearing, cognitive, and other issues can't easily use it. And finally, go look up TriTrack Agile. Let UX work the way that they want, let engineering work the way that they want, and we'll find ways to bring these domains together on the cross-functional team that doesn't require one to work the way the other wants to work. So to quote my beloved Joe Rohde, former senior vice president at Walt Disney Imagineering, who has since retired, he said, "One should not be asking the question, how little can we get away with, but rather, how much can we afford to do to be really impressive?" This is the quote to hang on the wall, and it's how we start reinventing the customer experience. And with that, I am done with my presentation, and we can certainly take questions. Please hit the Delta CX website if you're interested in anything that I do, including my upcoming one-day Transforming Toward Customer Centricity workshop in April. And if I don't answer your question here today, feel free to email it over. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and invite Nick back so that we can take some questions.
Hello.
Oh,
Hello. Anyone have
Hi,
questions? Oh, bye, Pamela. And Melinda probably left. And, right. Anyone have questions? And Scene, everyone left.
Just a quick question. I come from a defense background, so I'm a systems engineer. And as a systems engineer, I see a UX specialist as a specialist domain at the forefront of when I'm creating my user stories and the systems architecture at the start. Once the architecture is decomposed, goes off, the UX with the system engineer facilitates the completion or validates and verifies what is produced by the software team or hardware team or whoever. From that validation, then you have that interaction with the customer, and then it gets accepted or not accepted. I was getting confused when in your presentation, I didn't see that idea of systems and systems engineering. To me, Agile is just a novel life cycle, just like waterfall, and it can be adapted to your needs if it's required.
I usually try to not undo other people's jobs. So it's not that I think that a systems engineer's job is required or not required. But what struck me about what you said is, and I may have misunderstood you, so I apologize, but it sounds like this is a feature factory and that customer centricity is you try to sprinkle it on at the end. And that if a company is not doing extensive research up front and basing the features on what we've learned from research, and you're just doing some usability testing at the end to see if this is good enough. I would suggest that this is still not necessarily building from customers' definitions of quality and done. This is based on internal ideas that we had. And so I'm not looking to do or undo your job. I would ask you to reassess that process and take a look at where did those ideas come from? Because where are you writing the user stories from? Because I don't need them. I need research. I need research to tell me what people's tasks, pain points, and unmet needs are. User stories are for engineering.
That's
so,
interesting.
Yeah, I would say take a fresh look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we need you, but probably in an adjusted way, because I think when we stop being a feature factory and we start saying, holy crap, what do people actually need? Why don't we go watch them use this product or use another product? Or let's say it's a brand new feature for something we've never built before. We go and watch how people do whatever the heck this is now outside of our company. Solution agnostic, system agnostic. How do people do this now? What are they doing? What are their tools or workarounds? What's going well and what's going wrong for them? And how can our company come in and be heroes that save the day?
No,
that's where we should be starting.
And that's how I write requirements, solution agnostic. What is the capability that the customer desires?
But how do we know what the customer desires?
That's where your investigation, that's where you have to embed with the customer.
Exactly. That's where the research has to come first. Because I don't know what's happening at your company, but a lot of companies are starting with product has an idea, a stakeholder has an idea, somebody wants to copy a competitor. You know, we're saying that we're going to write requirements and stories around what the user or customer needs. But I find at many companies that I work with, that is an internal guess or assumption of what people need, and it did not come from good research with people.
Yes, and that's my experience working with the software industry as well. Where I've worked with where there's hardware involved, it's slightly different because they have slightly different life cycles. With software, the mentality is we can fix it later.
Yes.
We might get it wrong, we can fix it because it's software. It's not hardware. We don't have to build something because it's soft. And that's the mentality of the software industry. That's what I found. But when you work with big solutions like submarines or aircraft, it's slightly different, because you are cutting material and there is a production line going and the tooling has to be there.
Yeah, but what often happens in those sorts of situations, especially when they're engineering-led projects, is that you're right, the technical challenge is what's taken on rather than the user experience or the software is considered usually an afterthought. And it's exactly as Debbie said, when you said if you're doing sort of build, test, learn, that's the wrong way around. And I would ask you and your teams, how is anybody building anything? Like, are you taking how do you know what to build and how to build it? I mean, without any input from users, you're building something to spec in a way that you think is the way that it should be done. You see what I mean? It's with a user research cycle in there, you've got that constant feedback sprint by sprint. And the whole point of the tri or dual track agile is that you get to do that. It creates the space. It creates maybe a 1 or 2 sprint gap so that you can lay the tracks behind the engineer in front of the engineering train so that you can inform the build.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you. To me, agile is about exploration. It's not the cheapest life cycle because you can get waterfall, which if you know what you're doing and you can join the dots, why would you do agile? But where you don't know what the customer, and it's a complex system, that method of abstraction or the agility that you have been 2 steps ahead in your design process and validating that before you build is totally logical in my mind. But
the way that I've worked with it most successfully is in dual track, but same principles as tri-track. We were doing all the discovery, and the way that it was constructed in a 2-week sprint, I was doing effectively discovery work up in the first sprint, in the first week of the sprint. The interaction designer would prototype something really rapidly. And in the second week of the sprint, I would test it. What that means is when you've got that whole track doing that here, and the output is, here's a validated thing you can build because it's all based around user needs and taking out pain points. When the engineering sprint comes in to take that ticket, it's already in a much better state.
It's interesting. As a system engineer working on a similar sort of project that you just described, that's exactly what I system engineer used to do. And at the forefront of my stories was, as an X, I need to do Y. As a stakeholder, I need this because of this. That was the first thing I wrote in my user story, because you get that context. Why does the customer or why does the user need this?
But
You can't.
But that's not a user story.
Yeah.
If your story starts with as a stakeholder, that's not a user story. That's a stakeholder story. And also, let me pull up another slide that I've got handy. So this is Tri-Track Agile. So the first stream of work says is research. So research looks to figure out what are people's needs, tasks, things like that. That feeds a second track, which here it's called discovery. The idea here is that this is where those needs and tasks and insights and opportunities are prioritized. Now we figure out what we're going to build. We don't start with what we're going to build. We start with what's going on for real humans, and then we figure out what we're going to build. Now, ultimately, you still don't have user stories at this point because we haven't built what it is. Once UX designs it, then we know what it is. User stories are typically built for engineering to get a user-centered perspective on what they're building so that they remember to care about users. But I don't need user stories.
Hang on.
And so the idea here is that this is what Tri-Track Agile looks like, and it's not necessarily about you can see from the drawing that the first two streams of work might not even be working in sprints. They're working in their own ways, but this has been planned ahead with engineering so that engineering knows to expect certain work at certain times. And of course, there is collaboration along the way. This isn't siloed, but it doesn't mean everybody is on a sprint plan.
Okay.
And the thing is the difference I see in user stories is that a difference in a user story and a user need. Sometimes they are written in a similar syntax. I see that all the time in Jira, all day and all night. As a X, I need to do Y so that I can do a thing, which is exactly the same syntax for a user need. The difference is when it's written in an engineering way as a user story for an engineer, as Debbie has said, it's usually, as a user, I need to find a buy button so that I can complete the sale. You know, it's not what anyone would consider a genuine user need. That's a syntax for describing a technical behavior that needs to be developed, right? It's just breaking it down so the developer knows exactly the behavior of the thing that needs to do. At least that's on my journey, that's what I see what happens. Whereas the user need stuff that Debbie and I live by is all as a supplier, I need the system to be able to support my shared email address so that I don't miss out on opportunities, you know, my team's shared email address, those sorts of things, which are highly contextual, highly relevant. And if you don't design them in mind, that's the stuff that the genuine stuff that contributes to actual value, usage, you know. So that's why they're very different things. And it is an absolutely common misconception. The worst part, and we can probably rant about this all night, is when good product people like yourselves start writing user stories devoid of user research. And when those user stories are meant to be representing user needs, then we're into really bad territory because you're building the wrong thing from the outset. Very dangerous, super big red flag.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Let me move on to Kalina's question in the chat, and here's Nick's red flag. It says, fixed scope does not work with Agile. No, it sounds like the defense is more fixed scope. It's not so much that it's fixed scope. It's more the idea of having worked out what the design and the product is before engineering starts building it from the sense of the person's workflow. So like, for example, let's say we're going to build a brand new checkout flow. And of course, this may or may not be a thing for you, but let's just use this as an easy example. Very often engineers will say to me, well, Debbie, why can't you create the login and then give it to engineering to build? And then why can't you create the enter your shipping address and give it to engineering? And then design the billing address and give that to engineering, design the credit card, give that to engineering. And so just as an example, engineering thinks of these things in these small pieces because that's the way engineering works. They take these things and they break them down, and that's how they end up getting built. But UX doesn't work the same way as engineering. You know, that's ultimately the point of all of this, is that we don't work the same way, but I find that engineers expect us to work the way that engineers do. So it's not so much that it's about fixed scope or not fixed scope, it's more about what is the user's task and workflow here. Their task is the checkout. They see the checkout as an end-to-end process. The checkout starts with them logging in or going to their cart and going through the however many steps and screens we have until the checkout is completed. That means if I want to design it and test it and improve upon it, I have to design and test the whole thing. I can't just say, hey, can you type your credit card into this field? Oh, you could? Well, then it must be good. I'm going to give it to engineering. You know, we saw larger scale disasters of this. Obviously, it's hard to compare my little checkout example with Boeing, but remember Boeing in the news a few years ago because they had some process that would have taken them something like 25 hours to test end to end, and they decided not to do it. They decided to test it in little pieces and then assume it would all come together just fine. I think that was the Starliner, and then it didn't come together just fine. So that's the, you know, on a obviously much smaller scale than Boeing and human lives, it is what UX is doing. And so it's not so much that it's fixed scope or not fixed scope, it's more that UX wants to first make sure that whatever we're building for people is an end-to-end journey that works for them, that solves their problems, that took their pain points into account, that built something for their unmet needs. Now we have, you know, if you want to call it fixed scope, I guess you can, but it's not a term that I use. Now we have a product or a feature or something, assuming it's not just a small fix. Now UX can, now of course I will be collaborating with engineering all along the way, so they're not surprised at the end. This is not a siloed experience. I meet with engineering at least once or twice a week and say, this is the direction this is going in. You know, is this feasible for you to build? Do you have the time and resources to build this? Is there anything in the design I have to not do because you don't have the API calls, the microservices, whatever it is? So ultimately, the idea is to make sure that when engineering starts building, it is a known, vetted, validated, designed concept, rather than in some organizations, engineering is building a guess, the MVP, some piece of a guess, like, well, we'll just give them a credit card form and build the rest of it later. And so the idea is to build with the users in mind something that they would see as 5-star quality. Because again, when you get an app or a website or a system that you hate, you know there is an engineering team on the other side where someone said, ooh, you know, let's not let UX bother with this for too long. Or, hey, we didn't need to research with people. We know what they want. And so, you know, you can always tell when that's happened from the stuff you use. So, you know, if we don't like using that stuff, why are we doing that to our customers? Kalina says, but what about the saying, if I listened to my customers, I would have built a faster horse and not the car? First of all, that was actually never said. And second of all, we don't want to start to take the approach of, if I listen to my customers, they will lie to me. So I hear a lot about, you know, oh, customers lie to us, we shouldn't listen to them. But please hold, I've got a slide on that, and I'm going to make you look at it now. I just have to find it. Where did I put it? Here it is. Okay, super. Let's bring up this one and run it. Come on. Oof, hold on. What slide is this? It is 36. Give me a moment. Let me see if I can get 36 cooking. Cancel. Oh, my PowerPoint is being crabby. Please hold on. So slide 36, because I've got you covered. Here we go. And also, let's make sure we are not using excuses, and we are not using things that somebody supposedly said in 1910 as a reason to do or not do something now. Let's be careful of this type of stuff. So here's my slide on this. You know, it's hey, we keep hearing users lie to us, or they don't, we shouldn't listen to them. They're going to ask for crazy crap and whatever. And the reality is that we ask them flawed questions. The reason why we get garbage back from them, and the reason why it looks like they don't know what they want, they're not the best architects of their own solution. But the problem is, if we say to them something like, well, do you want a faster horse? Or would you like it if our company built a thing where it did a thing and then it did this other thing? You're going to end up with a lot of people who are trying to be polite. And people will say, oh, yes. They'll tell your marketing team, oh, yes, I would want something like that. I'll pay for something like that. But they're all thinking about different things. They're all imagining different solutions to their tasks and needs and problems. And none of us are reading their minds, and none of us are bothering to find out what that actually is. And so in reality, the upfront UX research will show us what people really need, so that we don't have to ask them stupid questions like, well, what do you want? People don't know. They are poor architects of their own solution. You might even not, you might find sometimes you did a solution for something and then later on you said, oh man, that wasn't the best way to do that. I made that way too long. I made it way too complicated. I made it too expensive. It's jobs for people like me and Nick to come in and use what we know about psychology and behavior and observing people to know what this is without having to ask people. So again, I would just want to warn people away from, well, if we ask people what they want, they're going to say a faster horse. Right, so that's why Nick and I don't always ask people what they want. We go and watch what they're doing and we figure out what they need. Nick, something to add to that?
I can add to that.
Oh, good.
Can you hear me? I can add to that, Debbie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Debbie and Nick are the experts here. They are very spot on. If I can just add a little bit on that particular question that customers would have asked for faster horses, not the car. The asking for faster horse has a solution baked in it. So right. If you need to, there where UX personnel come in, where with their expertise, they can separate the user need from the solution. In here, the user need is user want to go faster. That's it. They are not asking for a horse. Asking for a faster horse is a solution baked in it. They are just asking that we want to go faster. Whether it is a faster horse or it is a car, is an innovative solution, or it comes from the people who are working on it. So that's the difference there.
And it could have taken any form. I mean, ultimately, if we had a UX researcher back when we had horses and no cars, if someone said, I wish I had a faster horse, a Nick or a Debbie might say, well, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to get done today? Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to go see my... Go ahead, Nick.
What people are trying to do is get from A to B in a more efficient way. If that was a teleporter, if the technology existed, they'd ask for, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's the point here.
Yeah, they wouldn't even want the faster horse. They would want to blink their eyes and they appear, 30 kilometers away. So, we have to learn what that task is, so another thing is someone will say, oh, I wish I had a faster horse. And I would say, well, where are you trying to go? And then I might say, and what are you trying to bring with you? Are you bringing something with you? Oh, yes, I've cooked 72 pies for this. Okay, well, all of a sudden, riding on horse with 72 pies doesn't make sense. So we have to learn more about what people are trying to do so that we can try to match a technologically and time-appropriate solution for them. Nick and I would love to build everybody teleporters, but they don't exist yet. Nick?
Kalina, I get this most times of every gig that I'm at for the past 15 years. That whole horse analogy of Henry Ford. The point is that when people say that, it's coming from a place of naivety or inexperience. It's a way of saying, basically, this is top-down thinking versus bottom-up, and that's a fundamental difference. It's a paradigm. It's polar. It's completely so. The top-down is is innovation, is iPods and cars and all of this, teleporters, right? And the sentiment is right. But for the large majority of what we do in the digital world, they're not always innovation projects. Okay. Sometimes they're BAU, new stuff, but it's not wildly innovative. So yes, it's right. If you ask people about carrying lots of music around, they wouldn't necessarily come up with an iPod, right? That is innovation. Great. That's wonderful. But people are applying that principle with a really broad brush in an inappropriate way. And that means you're denying yourself the bottom-up influence, insight, direction, value, all of these good things. So yeah, the way to challenge that is to say, let's try it slightly differently. Let's try learning first. See about the quality of the build, quality of the outputs, quality of the KPIs.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and thanks for bringing it up. These are all things Nick and I have heard and that we're used to speaking to, which is why I have slides ready to go from my other presentations where I'm like, oh, that one? Yeah, be right back. Got that one. So yeah, ask any question. I probably have some slides for it, but just didn't have time for them today. So, because I think I have 2,000 slides at this point, but at least I know where to find them. In this context, how does the relationship between a product owner and a UX professional look like day to day and within the product life cycle? So again, in my dream world, and I can pull up a slide for this if you'd like. In my dream world, this is, let's see, where's my slide on that? Here it is, 107. Please hold. Okay. All right. Nick's like, I'm going to go take a nap. Tell me when Debbie stopped talking. Okay, so slide that shows nothing yet. So imagine this is a high level dream process. This is what I wish people would consider switching to. So we start with research so that we can find root causes, needs, tasks, workflows, workarounds, knowledge, all the things that we've been talking to, people, systems, contexts, and that's where we would start. Now, this would feed the 3 voices model. So product, UX, and engineering would come together to review all of the outputs and outcomes from the research. What did we learn about people with related to whatever we were researching? How they're trying to get from point A to point B, or they're trying to do this checkout. So what did we learn about them? What are the pain points, unmet needs, and opportunities? Now, product, UX, and engineering can get together to prioritize those. Very often, UX is thinking more about the customer. Very often, engineering is thinking about engineering. And very often, the product representative is trying to combine business goals with what's going on for the customer. So you bring these together for prioritization. Okay, now that we learned that there are 7 crappy things going on for customers that our company can fix or rethink or improve upon, which one should we go for first? Let's prioritize this. So now we've got a prioritized pain point or need. It's not a feature yet. It's just, holy cats, look how hard it was for people to check out. Or, oh my gosh, people can't pay their bill online yet. We never built that. Whatever it is, remember, this is still just a high level concept or need. Now, and I've got a video about that. That's why there's a little picture of a video there. Now we can get into some road mapping and planning. Now, product can do their types of road mapping and planning. UX needs to do their types of road mapping and planning, because now that we have a bunch of prioritized user needs, pain points, whatever it is, UX has something to work on. They've got something to design. We know what's the first thing we're going to go after, and we're going to start designing that. So we can all start road mapping. UX can, of course, estimate their time. To me, anybody with 7 or more years of UX experience should be good at estimating their time. Don't ask the juniors. And so we should be able to say, okay, product engineering, here's how long we need to do design. Here's our rounds of testing and iteration. Here's some other stuff we need to do. Here's when we think this is going to be done. And of course, we're going to check in with you and collaborate along the way. That, of course, feeds into the tri-track agile model that we've been talking about, where research happened first on its own work stream, but it is continually happening both in research we might need for later things and testing the ideas, since in our world, researchers are also usually testers. It's not a separate job like QA. And then we've got our designers and strategists doing the middle bit and then bringing it to engineering. If we find out we don't know something at some point, if we find out that we're missing information, if we see an assumption, a gap, let's go back and do the research. That would be the right thing to do versus guessing and saying we'll fix it later. So again, this is the dream model. And then, of course, that means that concept and designs are the features. So whatever UX has built are now the features. Those can be turned into, I advanced this a little bit too long. What UX now designs are the features. This is the product, these are the features, and as these are being vetted and validated, they can be turned into user stories, tickets for engineering, however you want to do it. But notice that this isn't a requirements-centered thing. We might have requirements documents, but they should tell us things like policies and laws and things that we can't get away from that we're not going to learn in research. But they shouldn't say users want a bar graph that we don't know that. We don't know that until research happens. So requirements, user stories, stuff like that would be written more for engineering later in the game. And then, oops, wrong direction. And then hypothetically, if we're doing an MVP, you would take what UX has designed and say, okay, is there a subset of this that we can start with that is still 5-star quality for people and solves their problem? I think if we looked at the MVP more that way, which by the way is how the US military looks at the MVP model, the idea is, okay, UX has designed it. Can engineering build all of this? Or does engineering need to build this in some sort of smaller pieces? Now it's up to your CI/CD pipeline whether or not you're going to save up some of those pieces for a later release, or you're going to release them as you build them. That's a whole other question. And I try to stay out of that because I'm UX and you're engineering. But that would be the dreamy kind of model for how this could work, to be much more user-focused and customer-centric, to make sure we're really building in quality for people, and that's where some of the relationships between product and engineering would be. But I know it seems like a very far-away dream. I know. Let's see. Ilan says there are problems in enterprise that cannot be solved within a year or two. So interim solutions and transitional system architecture happens. What would be the role of CX on the project? Same. I mean, in my opinion, even if you have to put out a Band-Aid, I would rather design the Band-Aid than be uninvolved in the Band-Aid. Because my background and experience and knowledge of these things, and certainly Nick has way more extensive knowledge than I do in things like psychology and behavior. He's got the PhD. I have a degree in music, but I did take some psychology classes. So ultimately, Ilan, I would say you would still involve CX or UX in that, because who should design the transitional system? Who should design the interim solution? Do we understand the right features to put in the interim solution? Did we talk to people? Did we watch their workflow? Did we prioritize what's in their workflow? I think that utilizing what I'm presenting would help you there a lot. By doing that early research, we would be able to say, you know what, this is a 2-year project and we really want to try to get something out there every 4 months, 6 months. Let's do this research up front so we can see what the whole thing's going to look like, and then we can work together to prioritize these pieces, because man, it looks like people really live or die in this part of our system. We should probably build that first. Or someone's going to say, no, there's a dependency on this other thing, we can't build that first. Okay, that's why this is a collaboration between the 3 voices, and we need that information. But I would say still include your UX buddies on this, because we should be able to help you prioritize so that you're building these things in the best order for the customers, and so that when this gets designed, it wasn't an engineer's guess at a screen. Because if it's not well designed when you release it and you put out some sort of temporary version, everyone's going to learn how to use that. And then I've got a slide on this. And then when someone says, okay, let's put out the real version, you know, it's 2 years later now, then you're going to bring in UX, and then we're going to make it better. Now everybody has to relearn it. That's going to be, you know, it can be done, but it can be frustrating. I would say make it awesome at every step of that process. Anything people are going to see, make sure UX was involved, make sure it was designed, make sure it was tested multiple times. And so that would be my suggestion. Even when we have to put a Band-Aid on stuff or put it out an interim solution, UX can still help you with business intelligence and risk mitigation. And Terrence is typing. He says, you mentioned the tip of the iceberg is building blocks, which potentially leads product owners to believe they can have input in the design. How do you deal with this? Oh, I have like 7 slides on that. Yeah. So it's really common, you know, people see, especially work that Nick or I do, and I'm sure he can speak to this if he rejoins us. Let's all hold hands and bring Nick back to the table.
I'm here. I haven't gone anywhere. I've been here the whole time.
You just turned off your camera. I missed you. You know, it's like, oh no, he doesn't exist anymore.
No, I'm here.
Shiny object. So this is a common one. You know, people see the work that Nick or I do and they go, oh wow, that looked so easy. And Nick and I can make it look easy because we're good at it. And there are many other people who are good at it. And so it can look easy because it looks like, oh, wow, you know, you told Debbie and Nick about this thing and they just came up with this interesting research or this interesting design. And so I'm really working very hard to try to get product owners and product managers, business analysts and engineers out of UX's work. As I said, first of all, you're not letting us into your work and we kind of don't want to be there and you don't want us there. You do not want me writing code. Even as a passionate 7-year-old, as you saw in my lovely school photo from 1979. So I'm trying to get product out of the UX work because product doesn't even know what they don't even know. They just think, oh yeah, you just sketch a screen and now you've made a thing. But there's so much education and knowledge and best practices and concepts that we put into it. Plus now you saw a whole process. And typically product is not going through that whole process. They're going, I have an idea. I have a vision for the product and we must follow my vision because my title says product. And I say that's not collaborative. And you're not the user. And what research are we working from? Whenever product says, I have a vision, I go, that is wonderful. You know, have you seen a doctor about that? And I also ask, you know, where'd you get that vision from? How did you learn what's going on for your real and archetypal users, the potential customers you hope to win over? Where did the vision come from? And usually it's, well, I know what customers need. Fantastic. Where'd you get that from? How do you know? What if you're wrong? Where's your risk register? Let's get out the risk register and we'll say, what happens if Sammy's vision isn't the good one? And I recently had, go ahead, Terrence.
This is one of the issues that I have to address most often with product owners. And it's especially with UX, CX, where they go, I think we should change a screen. And I'm just like, do you want to go and tell the platform engineers how to write some code for Terraform? And then you can go to the QAs and ask them. But it seems like they go, oh, it's pictures. I can magically, and you're like, it's not pictures.
Terrence, there is an easy answer to this, and I have to do this all the time. Yeah. You can call it rogue, you can call it maverick, renegade, or just efficiency. Agile, in fact, it's ninja agile. Is you take this product person's vision, whatever it is, and test it, right? It's about how it performs. Usually it performs terribly. Yeah. Okay. Once you've shown them a quick 2-3 minute show reel of people going, where's the button? What does that mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's all over. Game over. They'll never do that again. And they'll suddenly be unconsciously incompetent, which is where you want them because they're not UX people. Boom, done.
I've got one for you. That perfectly what Nick said, 1000%. That is usually where you have someone work up a prototype, bring it to usability testing, it crashes and burns. Something I did at a recent job was we had a product manager who was sure he had the vision, and told UX people they had to wireframe his vision, and then hired an outside, and then our UX people said no, so he hired an outside agency to circumvent them and told the agency to wireframe his vision. And so I decided to build my own design. I just kind of went with my own thing. I said, you know what, I don't have to listen to this guy. And so while he wasn't looking, I made my own design. And I brought it, and he kept saying, my vision is the best one. My vision is the right one. My vision, whatever. He saw my idea. He sent it to the agency and told them to steal everything from it. And I said, hey, look, that's cool. I'm glad you liked some of the ideas in my design. But at the very least, it means that your vision isn't the only one and might not be the right one, because look how interested you were in some of what I built. And I was only able to build that because I wasn't under your direction. I said, I want to see what happens if I want to see what our teams build if they are not told by you to follow your vision. That's not the critical thinking that we claim we want. That's not the fresh thinking you claimed you wanted fresh thinking. You hired an agency and told them what to do. So, so that was a bit rogue as well. That was like, I'm just going to design this thing and see what happens. And we took both of them to usability testing, and I'm waiting to see what happened. But now the usability testing is a little flawed because the agency's version has a bunch of my ideas in it. So the two ideas are closer than they were. But yeah, you can always, I mean, it's a little bit of a waste of time because someone has to prototype that up and take it to testing. But if it solves an argument, it's something I'll do. Usually I'll test my idea and the other idea, and they don't have to be similar because it's not A/B testing like Nick was talking about where you only want to change things. These are totally different concepts, and I tell people usually there's good things about each concept and you end up converging. But
okay.
Yeah, it's tough. Thank you.
I consider it a major milestone when the product manager, product owner is asking, how did it test? That's a critical maturity signpost. It's one of those stages that you have to get through. And that's what I work my butt off, doing all the things that Debbie said, just renegade wireframing, testing, in order to be able to get them into that place that says, I don't know what I'm doing. How does it test? Let me speak to the researchers or the UX team. That's the gold, that's the gold standard. And that's where the product manager should be. And any UXer or any person in that product team should be subservient to their product manager. And I don't mean that in a nasty way. I know my role in the product team. And in order for the product team to do well, the relationship between the product manager and the UXers is absolutely critical, because we are the return voice. We are the feedback loop, if you know what I mean. So the product person will have the roadmap, prioritize whichever way you want to do it, right, etc., and saying, right, I've got this item. Nick, Debbie, UX team, go find out a thing. You know, how do we build this thing, or how did it test, or whatever the needs are around this thing. They are orchestrating, they are kind of producing. And that the best product people I've worked with are really amazing orchestrators. They don't pretend to roll their sleeves up and do the research or the design. They acknowledge that they've surrounded themselves by experts or whatever they are as advisors, if you know what I mean. And yep. I think that's probably a really good model to look at.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
If I can add a little bit on top of everything you all have said. There's one thing about Agile books I would say is wrong, is where they have described product owner as the boss. So product owner as the boss, and organizations have gone a bit more on that as product manager on top of product owner. And in some places either product manager is upper hierarchy or product owner is whichever. Anyway, there's kind of that power hierarchy is where it is wrong. Product owners are supposed to be representative of the customer, and the customer or the user, but you do that by having the researchers on board, and you listen to the researchers who are bringing the voice of the customer or voice of the user. And product owners are the people who take that forward, build the bridges with the engineers, with the stakeholders, with everyone around them. it is just that facilitating role is what product owner's role is. Yeah, it is misunderstood, and people think that product owners are the bosses, they decide kind of thing. That is a misunderstanding.
Yeah, and I want to jump on what Kalina's saying in the chat. They've written, so the UX has the delegated authority of the product owner, while the PO remains overall accountable for delivering value. The PO is ultimately accountable for delivering the best value. Oh, thanks, Amy. Bye. So here's the thing, Kalina. In my dream world, I would like to see product engineering and UX equally accountable, because what I find is that when a company says that product owner or product manager is ultimately accountable for delivering value, that's when you get some of these tyrants. That's when you get people who say, well, if I'm ultimately accountable for delivering the value, we better go with my idea, because my idea is great and I'm going to be accountable for this, so don't you do your ideas. We have to do my idea. And I think that what we have to do is bring back more equality to this. Like even what we just heard said, that product is not the boss of everything. This is supposed to be 3 equal voices. That's the three voices model. Product engineering and UX should be equal, and I think equally accountable. Product is usually accountable to, did they fulfill business goals and KPIs? UX is, did we fulfill customers' needs and the customer side of it? And engineering is, did we make it technically excellent and performing fantastically? They should all be held accountable. And I think when you have only one being held accountable, or one being the boss of this or something like that, that's where you get this imbalance where product decides they rule everything, and engineering, you're doing what I'm saying, and UX, you do what I'm saying. And that's where I see a lot of these things in these companies when we say, well, product is ultimately accountable. And I say this at every talk I do, and I'll say it again. I wish someone would hold me accountable at any job I've ever worked at, because if I were being held accountable, someone would care about the quality of my work. And because people don't hold UX accountable, sometimes bad UX work is done, sometimes by non-UX people, and sometimes by incorrectly hired UX people. I want to be held accountable. I want someone to go, this UX work wasn't right, and then I want to go, good, let's take a look at that. Did I do a bad job, or did you not give me enough time to do a better job? Like, I want to be held accountable. So I personally don't go for the PO is ultimately accountable for delivering value, because I find that when we have that, the PO delivers business value to the stakeholders and sometimes disregards the customer value. Tutu says, understanding the roles of PO and the team is lacking in most organizations. Yeah, and the problem is we all have competing books and speakers and trainers and Scrum, you've got, what about what the Scrum Guide says? There's all of these things. I mean, Scrum.org partnered with one of the most disgraced people in UX for Scrum's take on UX. They partnered with someone almost none of us like. They partnered with a book and a model that most of us found non-viable. And that's who Scrum.org partnered with for their approach to UX. So congratulations on your guide and your training and your certificate. They partnered with the worst model. So again, to me, if you're just going by Scrum guides, bring back your critical thinking. Don't do everything by the book. To me, Agile is about starting with a book and then throwing the book away when you find what works best for your organization and what works best for your type of products or services or your cadences. You start with the book and then make it your own. That's the whole point of the word Agile. It's going to change for what's happening in the organization. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that lean UX is neither lean nor UX. It's absolutely not lean, and it's not even UX. It's basically designed by committee, and it says don't hire specialists, don't let them do the work, let engineers do UX work. You can see how almost nobody in UX would be like, yeah, please take our power away and let everybody do our work and shun our specialists. So it's a completely non-viable model, and that guy just makes money off training. So
but if people held anybody accountable, as Debbie was saying, or even cared about or knew about UX and product, you would see that stuff doesn't perform. If you get amateurs or not researchers performing research, you generate generally invalid insight. And if you build anything on invalid insight, you are almost certainly building the wrong thing, or you're building it at risk, which is no way to live. So, yeah, in a nutshell.
Nick's totally right. Can you imagine the garbage your company has released that had to be fixed later that you wouldn't have released if anybody were being held accountable? Because let's face it, y'all say, oh, the PO is going to be held accountable. I've never seen one held accountable. As long as they are delivering some sort of business lift, even if it's a 0.1% metric lift, I've never seen a PO held accountable. And I've seen POs and PMs manipulate the numbers to make it look like, oh, there was a 0.1 lift, and they're not held accountable. So what is this accountability I keep hearing about? I want to see it.
It's not necessarily about the accountability, but although that is a really big factor, it's about, I think, it's about performance, in that it's about intel, in terms of intelligence. It's about building on knowledge or some level of surety or confidence than just putting millions of pounds or whatever the investment is in the project and hoping, because that's no way to manage any kind of a product or service. You need to know these things. And so by learning these things correctly or with a high degree of confidence earlier on, everything else, there are always problems in projects. That's one less problem to deal with.
Yeah, so I can't get wrapped up to things like the Scrum Guide. I mean, Safe Agile says we use Principle 9, decentralization, to say that UX can be decentralized. But yet, if you look at what their Principle 9 says, UX meets all three criteria for things that can't be decentralized. So I can't say, well, Safe Agile says it, so everybody, zombie out and do it. So, be careful of some of these things. I think, we have to bring back the critical thinking. That's what I want to see the POs do. And the Scrum Masters and the Agile coaches, I want to see them use critical thinking to find the best ways to work, rather than saying, but my guide says this. Great, start there, but then critically think about it and say, is that going to get what's Agile Manifesto Principle number 1? Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. If we are not building 5 stars out of 5 stuff, then be agile and shift what you're doing. That to me, that's the bottom line. Make agile work for you and don't feel beholden to any particular book or training or whatever, because everybody's got books and training saying the opposite things. POs and PMs are writing books about how POs and PMs should do UX work. You don't need UX people. Give it to the PMs. Evidently, these people have nothing to do all day and they need something to do. And then Safe says engineers can do UX work. Give it to them. And then Scrum says, yeah, we found the one UX guy on the planet who's willing to say, let's let the engineers do some UX work. We found that guy. We'll say, that's what we say. Forget about all these things. Anybody can write a book that says anything. Nick?
Yeah. I spent 4 hours today doing 4 user sessions, 4 45-minute user research sessions. That's why I'm pretty knackered out. I'm tired. It's hard work, even when you know what you're doing. So when you don't know what you're doing, it's doubly hard work. I need the point that I need you to take away is that market research does not equal or is not even really familiar to user research. They are fundamentally different practices. They share some similarities in places, and they share the name research. For me, as a practitioner, as a senior lead user researcher, I can count on one hand over the past 15, 12 years the number of surveys that I've ever used. I mean, It's very specific.
Nearly zero.
Need to do it. You can see a lot of people say, well, let's just ask the audience, and they send out a survey. Trust me, surveys are hell. That they're awful. You probably know that. You get garbage back. You don't build from surveys. At least we don't use in user research and UX, and you shouldn't in product. I'm sorry, that's a really big bugbear for me, and it's a fight that I have all day and every day. If you can make sure that you're doing proper user research and not market research.
Agree. I have the same thing. And by the way, I just got a message from someone I mentor. I literally want to read this to y'all. It says, at the nonprofit I'm volunteering for, my proposal for an observational study was shot down as not being agile enough. This person is trying to help a nonprofit better understand probably their donors so that they can get more donations. And she was told, your observational research isn't agile enough. Remember that anything is agile if we plan for it. If you tell me today that you need to know all of this stuff about our users or our donors by Friday, you're right, I can't meet that deadline. But if you say, Deb, we have some Q2 work coming up, and we're going to need to know a lot more about our donors to make sure that we're facilitating donations in every way possible. I say Q2, and it's March 8th. All right, I can get something. I can get something to you in the next month or two. Yeah, thanks for the heads up. Boom! Now we're all agile.
Can I say something? In many places, they use agile as an excuse to do what they want. So they use even literally agile being agile. Let's be agile. Let's change everything like what I want. Basically, whatever they want. In some organizations, when they are moving from such a huge waterfall mindset to any change, agile mindset, customer centricity, human-centered design, anything, it's a massive change for people. It's a massive change in mindset for people. So like any bandage, like small bandage or small baby steps, we are all here to support them change the way they are changing. By the way, Tutu has been having her hand up for quite some time.
I didn't see a hand up. I'm so sorry. What's up,
right.
Tutu?
Yeah, so I just want to make a comment that I recently joined a team of recent, and while going through the process to understand what the team was delivering and all that, one thing which I repeatedly told my team was that everything you're doing right now is an experiment, and we will specify a time where we will inspect what we are experimenting on, and we're able to determine if we want to continue it, and still specify when we will inspect that which we think is permanent right now, and go forward with it. So going back to that comment you made about the Scrum Guide, I believe several people are just following certain things which they've met on ground in every organization, and don't bother to go back to the Scrum Guide for anything once they've gone through the training whatsoever. So I believe the Scrum Guide is quite explicit about the rules, about what everybody's supposed to do. But everything you're doing in a team is an experiment. And I believe when people take it like that, and they're able to run with it and inspect, even the things we do in our everyday life, we're constantly experimenting. And, we inspect it, we reassess it, then we take informed decision going forward. So if everybody view that, what we do on our teams or in our organization as an experiment, then we're able to change course quickly and not say, no, we can't go back. This is the way it has always been done. It will benefit the whole team tremendously and the organization in the long run.
Absolutely. Tutu, I would definitely say that, this is nothing new. It's not me saying this. I'm just repeating other people's words. But the product manager in today's world is very much the experimenter. Experimentation is the order of the day when it comes to product development, right? The question really is who's leading it? Who's the figurehead for the science, if you know what I mean, or who's organizing, orchestrating it? Which is why the product person is the best person. However, there are different levels of when I say scientific maturity, I'm not talking academic maturity. I'm just talking in terms of structure and process and learning things with a degree of confidence. wherever that is in the team, leverage it and then get everybody, because everybody is part of the experiment and they're all running the experiments for you. But if you've got scientific literacy or you've got that experimental knowledge on how to acquire knowledge reliably, then absolutely leverage it and kind of socialize it around the team. It's just in time, I would love to believe that every product person becomes a lot more scientifically literate just in research methods and experimentation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was a great thing you said, and the thing that I would add to it is you can start with these guides and the books and the training and the templates and the models, and then the retro and other ceremonies and tools that we have are supposed to help us improve these. And I see so many people not making changes after the retro. And I think if we're going to feel like we have to follow the guide or the book or the training or whatever, no matter what our retro teaches us, then, you know, by what you're saying, the experiment is over. You know, like the whole point is to start from something and then make it better using the retro. But I have rarely been on a team that followed through on what they learned from the retro, and that's a whole other thing. And that's why I call for risk registers and retro, because we're claiming we're agile, which is about making change, and then we're not making change.
And people are very hesitant to be honest in retros these days. At least that's what I'm seeing, because we've all been in retros where somebody's been honest and been crucified. That's been me on a few occasions. I've watched it happen to other people. Sometimes people can't handle the truth. They don't want to hear it. And that can be a problem, right? That's cultural.
Yeah. Murals, I'm not plugging Mural, but Mural has got a great feature, which is the privacy mode, where people can't see who's written what. Then you reveal, which is perfect for that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody. I don't want to keep everybody too late. Terrence, anything left for us to do here?
Yeah, I think again, for people to come off of mute, put your cameras on, and just a big round of applause both for Debbie and Nick for two great talks tonight. Thank you very much. That's amazing.
Thank you very much.
Claps to Nick.
Thank you very much, everybody. Quick one. I've just dropped into chat there a link to a conference I did a couple of years ago. It's all about scientific design and adding science to your agility effectively. It's my number one. It's my most proud presentation, if you know what I mean. I strongly recommend you watch it as product folk. It's invaluable to you. And if you want to start climbing that scientific literacy curve, this is absolute gold dust. So go for it.
Yeah, I'm an hour ahead of everyone, so I'm yawning. Sorry. I'm in Italy.
So, everyone, this is recorded, so we can watch it back and get your LinkedIn details. Debbie, you said about was it an academy on how to recruit the right QA people? Was that? Sorry, CX.
Oh, yeah. So if you go to my website, you'll find lots of links. deltacx.com/links are some of the links that are related to my YouTube show. And then if you get to the deltacx.com website, just go to training, and under training, you should see attracting and retaining CX and UX talent. And also my new thing, transforming toward customer centricity, which is aimed at talking about the things we talked about today, about how we think we're caring about the customer because we did some testing, but the customer was not, no customers were harmed in the making of this product.
Good. I will, in which case I will talk about what is coming up next. So